Kia ora koutou and welcome back. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker for the morning. So a warm welcome to Russ Parai, who is a Kaupapa Māori and freshwater scientist from ESR, and he's beaming in from Hamilton today. So Russ engages with iwi, hapū and whānau and is guided by Ngāti Kahungungu ki Wairarapa. And that's to experiment on the properties and potential of native mānuka and decontaminating wastewater at the local Carterton District wastewater site. So Russ's work is drawing from two knowledge streams, and the aim is to bring the best version of ourselves to the table to solve for the environmental issues of today. A further passion of Russ's is our taonga species, the sentinel and tuakana or teacher ko tuna, the eel. This work sees him following the eel's presence and significance through time in freshwater lake systems using environmental DNA monitoring and Māori knowledge. Russell speaks today on combining both Māori and Western knowledge systems for the best outcomes. Tēnā koe, Russell.
Kia ora, Zoe. Can you hear me? Great. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Russleigh Parai tōku ingoa, no poriroa hau ko Ngāti Tōrangatira te iwi, ko wakatiwai Parai tōku papa, in picture. Mihi nui ki a koe e rangatira e rā. Just acknowledging your words and your presentation, really enjoyed it, and hopefully I can not detract from that beautiful whakaro shared. So I'll get straight into it, although Zoe pretty much captured the essence of what I'm about to say, and I guess a bit about what I'm doing in this space, having worked with Ra previously under Lakes 380, and my connection to Wairarapa Moana. We hear a lot these days about these two knowledge streams or baskets. I guess in working with water, I like to use the word streams, how they converge and flow, with the, I guess, with the aim to meet and to join as one body of water and heading in one direction. And so these two streams, we refer to them as mātauranga Māori and Western science. There is much debate in kōrero about how vastly different they are. A wide lens versus a very focused, almost through a microscope view. A subjective versus an objective approach. Back in the 70s, I'd go out with my dad, who was in picture here, and his brothers to catch tuna or eels. I didn't know the word mātauranga back then. We just did what we did. It was our way of life. We went out and we caught tuna for our whānau, for our iwi, and we brought them back. We'd just take enough to feed for a feed, and that was our way of life. I didn't know the difference between the long or the short fin tuna. I just knew how to carry the sack, which was my main job as a little boy. But I loved the experience, and I loved the opportunity for whanaungatanga, which was part of Mahinga Kai. As I walked with my tupuna, my whakapapa, all these values, I think which Ra touched on, all connect. They're not in isolation. You're doing it all at the same time whilst practicing kaitiakitanga. So it was a tradition of ours that went back many generations. Fast forward 45 years, and I've probably given away my age a bit, and how times have changed. Stocks are down, creeks have dried up, passageways have narrowed, straightened, water is polluted. Our fresh waterways, our lakes have totally changed. In 2018, I joined a national study project called Lakes 380 as part of my thesis. The aim was to understand the long-term health of New Zealand's lakes in relation to human activity and natural environmental impacts. And it was here again that I met my good friend. My specific focus was developing and applying methods for detecting the signature of New Zealand's native eel or tuna, kuwharuwharu, the longfin, and taking samples from the environment, or eDNA, environmental DNA. And the journey to date has been challenging. I'll touch on it very shortly, but it involves basically taking core sediment samples from lake beds. And in the core, we're able to go back many years, thousands of years, in fact, just by taking a 1 meter core out of the lake bed. It's a storybook. It takes us back in time. And as we go deeper, we go back further. And what we see in there are pollen grains, DNA fragments that we're able to put under a microscope, analyze. We're able to apply different methodologies to basically detect our tupuna, our whakapapa, the voice of those that once thrived here, even tuna. So the idea is to trace historical pathways of degradation so that future restorative efforts will be better informed and more likely to succeed. The whakatauki we use is me hoki whakamuri kia haere whakamua. By looking to our past, we can better inform our future. This same methodology was applied at Lake Mōwhitu, Rangitoto ki te Tonga, D'Urville Island, as well as Ra mentioned, to Wairarapa, Moana. And here's just a little, I guess, just touching on tuna. We regard tuna as our tuakana. They thrived in our waterways long before we arrived. Their whakapapa clearly placed them above and before us. And as such, they are our elder, they are our kaitiaki, they are our freshwater sentinel. I had wonderful childhood memories, as I mentioned earlier. But later, I was to understand the role of tuna, their contribution, their status, and their own mātauranga. Indeed, they had their own voice. And I guess the whole crux of my thesis, the title, He Reo no Te Puahu, A Voice from the Dust, which tied in quite aptly with the mahi that I was doing for my thesis, and tying together and drawing both mātauranga from our mana whenua, Ngāti Kahungungu, down at D'Urville Island, as well as applying scientific methodologies, going back in time to hear that voice. And basically their words are this: hey, we fed you over many generations. We sustained you, humanity. Now, in our time of need, as we struggle through commercialization, through pollution, it's time to look after us. It's time to protect us. And so that is the voice that I'd like to remind us all of, coming from our tuakana, coming from tuna. And so to that voice, we applied, again, scientific methodology to get species-specific identity on the long fin versus the short fin, and trial and error, using different genes, different primers. I won't get into the nitty-gritty, but just to give you a bit of a taste. At Cawthron, under Lakes 380, this was our mahi in designing that assay to detect our tuakana down core. And I guess this is all part of the challenges, and it doesn't say much, and I'm not going to spend too much time here either. But these are some of the results in trying to get specificity between the long and the short fin. Very much trial and error, where we can see amplification for the long fin, but we also get amplification for the short fin as well. So the idea is to get amplification for just one, and there we have it, and which we're able to succeed with at surface level and going down so far in the sediment as we go further down, as you can appreciate, the DNA is further compromised, that degradation sort of sets in. The other item that we were able to get from the core was pollen grains. And here we were able to, again, go back in time and create a very rich picture of what the vegetation looked like around Lake Mōwhetu, around Wairarapa Moana, around that lake as well, where we took core samples from. And we saw the tall podocarps that once existed there over 1,000 years ago before we set foot. We saw the totara, the matai, the rimu, the miro. We saw the beech, the fuscospora. But above all, we were able to define 3 reference dates before humanity, before Māori arrived, arrival of people, excuse me, and basically today's vegetation. And that's what we were able to capture from this core. So we're able to distinguish between the 3. We're able to see where pine came in, which told us of early European settlement. On the far right, we see the charcoal. We see clearing of vegetation for pastoral land use, for access to the lake, for access to the tuna, to create waka, for clothing and all manner. So this is the story that we're able to sort of build up. I guess when we're weaving the 2 knowledge threads together, one of the highlights is we're able to go from Latin on our pollen table to Māori, to make it more accessible, more recognizable for Māori, so they can see, matai, rimu, not podocarp, not fuscospora. So straight away, we saw the eyes raised and the light bulb come on in our kaumātua, our kuia. We were able to make that connection. And then the stories were able to flow. And they were able to tell us about harakeke, that we have a particular type called wharariki. Indeed, one of the places on Derwil is wharariki, where one of our tupuna live, Wetakia, where she grew up. So that is the beauty about combining both. We were able to get some information, and then we were able to sort of fill the gap from our mātauranga side, our basket as well. And wrapping this all up, and I've totally lost track of time. Apologies, Zoe, but maybe 1 finger, 2 fingers to let me know how many minutes I have left. I think getting to the crux of it, and Ra touched on it, is why. What does this all mean? We can draw the knowledge. We can apply the methodologies, but what does this all mean? For me, my journey started a few years ago, why I sort of ventured into this space, and it was for my dad, for my upbringing at Porirua, in a place that is very much polluted, and was trying to very diligently, as we are in Wairarapa, restore the Māori, restore the memories, restore the way we used to live, so that we could cast the net back in the 70s, I recall, and catch our flounder, our mullet, and take from that beautiful haven once again. How does it work? Are we so different? Māori, Pākehā. I grew up in Takapawahia at the Pā. I had a very rich upbringing through in Te Ao Māori, but my dad and his generation didn't have the reo. I didn't have the reo, but again, we lived it and we thrived in it. And in the weekends, I go out to the hut and I'd have scones with a dollop of cream and jam with my Pākehā, my mum's side. And so I guess I consider myself quite blessed and fortunate to be able to see through both, to appreciate both, but see the opportunity to bring both together. This thesis and this study did that for me. And I use the word manaaki tangata, a word that was shared with me by a good friend, Karen Pewhairangi from Tokomaru Bay, when we were driving up north. And she says, sounds like manaaki tangata we're talking about. There's manaaki tanga, which is hospitality. and Manaaki Tangata is not too far from it. But basically, it's looking after each other. It's giving the best version of ourselves to each other and bringing that to the table. Warts and all sometimes, if we have to, but understanding what the kaupapa is. And the kaupapa is cleaning up, restoring the Māori of Lake Wairarapa. And if we keep that in our focus, in our lens, it doesn't matter whether we're red, black, white or blue. We all have a common goal. We all share common values, and that's what I found to be at the heart of how this all works. If we share these values, then we will realize that vision at the end and in the end. So kia ora whānau, it's been lovely speaking to you, albeit short, and hopefully you've been able to take something from my presentation this morning.